Now, there's one other way we can notify a user, and that's through the notification facade. So let's review an example. I've set up an endpoint, payment/create. However, you'll see it requires a logged in user. And if I switch to PHP Storm, you can see I've declared that here. Notice the auth middleware that we've already reviewed. Okay, so let's go ahead and register a new user. And we're now signed in as John. So if I once again visit that page, we can access it. And all I have here is a button that simulates some kind of payment being made to the website. So when we click the button, we'll simulate the payment and then fire off a notification to the user that the payment has in fact been received. So if I submit it now, you'll see it wants a post request to /payments, but we haven't yet set that up. All right, let's do it now. Make a post request to /payments, and that will hit payments controller at store. And this also requires that you're signed in. All right, so let's go back to payments controller. We'll add a new store method. And yeah, here, we're not actually going to perform a payment. We'll make believe it was sent, and we'll then fire off a notification email. So up until this point, you've been using the mail facade to send emails, and that's great. However, an alternative approach is to use the notification facade. And I'll show you a few ways it's unique. So we'll pull in the facade there, and I can say notification, send the notification to the person who is currently signed in. And the notification is, well, we have to create one. Let's do that now. This is a notification that the payment has been received, right? So let's make a notification called payment received. Okay, so now if I open up the sidebar, you'll see in the app directory, you now have a mail directory, but also a notifications directory. And this is where things can get a little confusing because you'll think to yourself, well, should this be a mail or a notification? And the answer to that question is, well, it's a little tricky. Sometimes there's overlap. But as a general rule of thumb, what's nice about notifications is you are notifying the user in response to some action that took place on the website. So they made a payment, they closed their account, they liked something. These are all responses to an action that took place. Now, again, what's neat about notifications is the way you notify them can take many forms. It doesn't have to be an email, but it still uses the same API. So you could email them, you could send them a text message, you could notify them on Slack. You could even pull in a supported package to send them a physical postcard in response, and it all still uses the same notification API. So compare that against the traditional mail technique where you're just sending an email. So I think you'll find there's a little bit of overlap, but it'll be up to you or your team to decide when to reach for notifications and when to reach for a standard mail class. There's no hard rules there. Okay, so anyways, we will instantiate our new payment received email. And notice that was imported at the top. So let's take a look at it. It'll have a slightly different shape. So we can queue this. We can accept things through the constructor like usual. But now notice we have the delivery channels. And this is what I was talking about. You could have one notification that is distributed to the user in multiple ways. It could be mail. It could be an SMS notification. It could be Slack. It could be the postcard. And all of them can be represented here. Come on, how neat is that? So let's keep going down. For every different channel, we need some way to translate the notification to the proper format for the channel, right? So if we're sending an email, we need to know how it should appear, because a simple text message notification will be different than a full email you send. So we need some way to represent that, and that's what this is. If we were to translate the notification to an email, we're going to use this nice Fluent API to build it up. And I think you're really going to like this. Whereas before, we were loading a view where we manually wrote the HTML, here we're using, again, this Fluent API to add a line, and then a call to action button, and then another line. Okay, so if we keep scrolling down, here's the array format. We'll talk about that later. So I think we are ready to send this email. When the user clicks the payment button, they will hit the store method. We will then send a notification to the signed in user, and this is the notification we're firing off. All right, so back to Firefox. We'll try it again, and I forgot to redirect, but that's okay. If we switch to the email, there you go. We have the same thing as before, but now we are using the notification facade. So I want you to have a look at this because it's really neat. If we go back here and we scroll down, notice how this translates. So a line represents basically a paragraph, the introduction to the notification. Next, action. Think of call to action button. It is a button with this text and a URL to our homepage. There you go. Finally, we have another line, and we can even change things like this as well as the greeting. And in fact, hello is the default greeting. So why don't we play around with it? Let's change the greeting to, how about, what's up? Then we'll have a line here. Let's do another line of basic lorem ipsum text. Then we'll have our call to action button, like sign up. And then finally, one more line to say thanks. The last step is, what should the subject be? Because at the moment it says payment received, which again is based upon the name of the class. And that's fine. However, why don't we tweak it a little bit? Why don't we say your Laracast payment was received? Okay, so again, we've used this Fluent API to construct an email. So if we give it another shot, make the payment, fire off the email, and there you go. How neat is that? And again, clicking the button will take us back to the main website. Finally, one last note here. Notification send user payment received. It's okay, but instead I'd prefer to say request user notify them that the payment was received. So notice as I write that out, it reflects more the way we would naturally speak. So as it turns out, we can do this very thing. Have a look. If I check out our user model, out of the box with Laravel, it includes this trait called notifiable. Let's have a look at it. Notice routes notifications. All right. And if we take a look at this, here are the 3 notification specific methods we can call. The only difference between notify and notify now is whether it is sent immediately or sent through a queue. Let's just stick with notify for now. And this does effectively the same thing. Okay, so if I switch back to payments controller, sure, once again, you could do notification send, and that will often be useful if you are notifying a collection of users. For anything else, if you are notifying one user, stick with this approach. I think it reads a lot more cleanly. Especially if you already have a user variable, you could just say user, notify, payment received. I like that a lot. All right, but anyways, if you're excited, the next chapter is dedicated to notifications. You'll learn how to fire off text messages or even store the notifications in the database so that they can be presented to the user the next time they load your website. It's pretty neat, so when you're ready, let's move on.